If you were dating someone and if they said they don't want to make love with you until they were married to you, how would you react? I once dated a girl who had been mistreated in a previous relationship and wanted to wait until marriage, or at least engagement, before having intimacy. She needed the security of knowing she wasn't being used. Their relationship didn't work out. We remain friends to this day, but not for that reason. I completely respected it, and although it wasn't right for us, I'm hopeful that she'll find the right person for her. Intimacy is important, but it isn't everything. So why didn't it work out? Story 2. The question naturally leads you to think about someone refusing for religious reasons. To me, that would be a pretty quick relationship stopper. Less because of the lack of intimacy, and more because I don't think I would be compatible with someone who lets religious doctrine dictate their life like that. There's little doubt that it would be prevalent in other aspects of their life as well that would be a negative factor in a relationship for me. E.g. prioritizing going to church on Sunday instead of spending one of our days off together. I'm not sure what I'd do in the situation you describe. I know myself well enough to know that I'd have no problem going slow, respecting boundaries and things like that, but compatibility is a significant factor in a relationship, so I'm not sure I could put it off until marriage. Before marriage, you should have had discussions about important topics like money, kids, goals, career, and life. Knowing that you're compatible in bed is at least as important as having agreement in those topics. Story 3. That's what my wife said to me. We would kiss and pet, but not much more. I love her, and what's important to her is important to me. She decided she wanted to after she realized that I was serious about her and our relationship. We had intimacy about a year into the relationship, and we got married 4 years in. Someone saying that they want to wait until marriage might simply mean that they want to be with the person they're going to be with long term. You should always respect the person's boundaries, and if their boundaries are not something you can respect, don't be with that person. It really is worth it, no matter who it is. By the way, we've been together since the late 80s and have both had boundaries that we respected, but it has always been worth it. I'm glad to be her husband. Story 4. My current boyfriend was like this. He wanted to wait until marriage. If it were anyone else, I would have dipped out, but for some reason, with him, I told him I'm willing to wait. Then a month passed into a relationship, and he asked if we could have intimacy because he kept getting too turned on when we would do other stuff. Now, 2 years later, we have a healthy, intimate life and overall relationship. Lol. Story 5. I'd stop dating her. Number 1, if she stays true to it, then it's way too much of a risk for me. Lifelong incompatibility sounds like a nightmare. Number 2, she seems to have some ideas surrounding intimacy that I very much disagree with, which is a sign for incompatibility as well. Number 3, if it was just a test, then I dodged a bullet. I'm not interested in someone who does BS like tests. Story 6. My friend did this. She waited until marriage for the sake of the man. He got to the wedding night and the guy froze. Actually turned his head away from his new wife in disgust when she tried to get into the hot tub together. They did not have intimacy. They were divorced 4 weeks after the wedding. They didn't want to have intimacy. He actually said he thought she looked disgusting. She almost ended it all and was depressed for a long time. Intimacy is an important part of any relationship, and that situation taught me that I would never be with someone if they made me wait until after I was married. There's just too much risk. Story 7. Been there, done that. Didn't have intimacy before marriage for religious reasons. Found out after marriage we're on opposite sides of the spectrum. Difficult to get through, and even today, 10 plus years later, it's still a struggle at times. Would 10 out of 10 recommend you have intimacy before you commit to marriage to check your compatibility? Story 8. I mean, that's a totally valid thing to want. You get to choose how much intimacy you have and when you're ready for it. With that said, it is an important part of any romantic relationship for me. Intimate compatibility is a fundamental part of how well I click with someone. Waiting until marriage essentially means waiting until we're married to see if we work as a couple. No thanks. Story 9. Been there, done that. We waited and have been together 20 years. We have great intimacy and we have it often. We have experimented more than the second sentence would suggest and are secure in knowing neither of us would ever cheat and have excellent self-control. Admittedly, it took a while to get good at it, but we're happy and satisfied. Story 10. I did this. They'd each already been active in bed. I was actually quite mad and jealous, but we agreed that we wanted to establish a non-intimate connection, something deeper than intimacy. We dated for a few years, got married, and eventually had intimacy. We've been together almost 20 years. It's not really that big of a deal for some people. I get the argument that people want to know if their partner is good and bad before they commit to them, but I challenge that with the notion of establishing a non-intimate connection, and being interested in each other changes the perspective of how you perceive intimacy with that person. Also, what keeps you interested in that person when their body changes? If they can't have intimacy, if there's a physical distance, I think it builds a different foundation. But as I said, I understand why people don't wait. I don't think intimacy and establishing a connection are mutually exclusive, but at some maturity levels, it's difficult to focus on both. It can be done if both commit to it. Story 11. Ask where she's coming from and what led her to that decision. Then explain why it's important to you and if you can find a compromise. All these people on here rushing to the just break up decision obviously don't care about other people's thoughts or histories enough to try to understand their perspective, nor do they have the decency to communicate. If you care about her, at least give her the respect of trying to understand her mindset. Story 12. It's perfectly fine for her to want to wait until marriage. She has every right to say no for any reason she wants, and even if she doesn't have a reason, she has a right to the intimate life she wants. But so do I, and I would have to end the relationship there. Everyone immersed in purity culture completely lacks any grasp of their compatibility. If you intend to have a relationship in which you have intimacy, you need to make sure you're actually able to enjoy it together. If you have entirely different wants and boundaries in the bedroom, or God forbid they oppose each other, then you aren't compatible. And if you only find this out after you're married, then your options are either divorce, have an open marriage, or strap in for a miserable intimate life for however long the marriage lasts. I don't want to spend however much on a wedding just to have to spend more to undo it or be dissatisfied with a part of my life. The girl in your question can have the relationship she wants. She just can't have it with me. Story 13. As someone who went through this, she did have a fairly religious background, where I did not. Her reasoning was she wanted it to be the best gift she could give her husband. Turns out she was parroting this line of BS from this youth group she was part of when she was in high school. Fast forward to getting married and the chemistry was completely off. There were probably more to her reasons for the limited times we did have intimacy. After years of marriage, she stopped completely, and I was tired of jumping through hoops to have it. The marriage ended, not for those reasons alone, but it did play a small part, and I found someone that the compatibility is through the roof. Bottom line, it's a personal choice, but looking back, there's no way I would go through that again. Story 14. I'd appreciate their honesty and wish them well in their future relationships. Marriage is a very annoying legal procedure to get out of, so getting married should never be taken lightly. Intimate compatibility is very important to me, and knowing the answer to that before being legally tied to someone is a requirement I'm not willing to budge on. Furthermore, most people who don't want to have intimacy until they're married fall into two groups. Being religious or viewing intimacy is not that important. If it was for religious reasons, then that means this person wants to live a life dictated by their religion. Meaning marrying them also means marrying into that religion, and there will come a time where that religion might interfere with our lives. As someone who grew up in a religious household and community, I'm very much not interested in subjecting myself to that, and more importantly, I definitely wouldn't want any children of mine to have to go through that either. If it was the latter, then they don't view intimacy and are getting married the same way I do. Talking about intimacy and desires can only get you so far. Hell, I've already been in a relationship where compatibility was an issue that we tried multiple things to resolve, but just didn't work out. And we ended the relationship on good terms, realizing that it wasn't anyone's fault, but it wasn't what we wanted, and took it as a valuable learning experience. Had we been married first, then breaking it off would not have been as easy, which some I view as a positive, but I think it's forcing parties to compromise on things rather than choose if they're okay with it. Story 15. I was in that situation. She wanted that because of religion. Considering I'm pretty atheistic, I think I was pretty reasonable and understanding. It lasted 2 years, where only during the last semester it became a problem for me. Though it became more of a problem in terms of, where is this heading? She wanted to get married soon. I didn't want to marry until I was at least 27. I was 19, and I wasn't postponing intimacy for 8 years. I was already feeling insecure about it. Not gonna wait that long for the possibility of marrying and hating the intimacy either. I gradually began finding her religion to be wackier and wackier. She took me to her church, and I wanted to get the hell out of there. After she took me to the church for the first time, I broke up within a couple of months. I only took that long because I loved her and she didn't seem like a bad person, but the craziness that was in her family and her friend circle surely made me realize my decision quickly. Of course, when I got out of that relationship, I was pretty much the devil. She started spreading the rumor that I'd cheated on her because she couldn't believe that I could leave because of her intense religion. Story 16. For me, marriage is a lifelong commitment, and I need to know someone intimately before I'd be willing to make that commitment. I need to know we enjoy each other and are highly compatible, so that would be a deal breaker for me. It also is a view that is almost always rooted in deep religious belief, and I couldn't be with someone who felt that strongly about their religion anyway, because I don't believe in any of it. That would undoubtedly cause major conflict between us. It sounds to me that the simple solution to all of your problems are just aligning your religious beliefs. Story 17. I would be overjoyed because that's what I plan to do too. See what I mean? In fact, that's what I'm doing with my girlfriend. We both mutually agree that we should wait until we are financially stable and independent, and being Christian, it just felt right. We still cuddle and get a little rough with each other, but we've limited ourselves to clothes on and no purposeful below the belt. I can understand the fear of being incompatible, but it's not a deal breaker for me if it turns out we're not. That's not the point of a relationship for me, and intimacy is not my priority in life. See what I said about just aligning your religious beliefs? Story 18. Hey, I appreciate your friendship and you're an amazing person, but not having intimacy before marriage is a big deal breaker for me. I wish I could say I would be able to continue this relationship as friends, yet having tried in the past and failed, I think it is best we part our separate ways. You're an awesome person, and you deserve to find someone who shares your values. Who knows if further down the line one of us reassesses and changes our values, we can revisit the spark. If that doesn't happen, it's okay. Now, if you need any closure about this relationship in the future in order to move on, let me know. Story 19. Intimate compatibility is essential for a successful and fulfilling relationship. Waiting until you've already committed to find out that you aren't compatible is a recipe for disaster. The classic marriage breaker. The guy loves whistles and the woman thinks it's disgusting. The guy wants intimacy at least 3 times a week and the woman wants intimacy once a month, or less. To be clear, I've also seen the same incompatibility with a gender reversed, where the woman has a much stronger need than the man. You don't have to be promiscuous, wait until the engagement, but after it's clear that you're headed for marriage, put off the wedding day for 6 months and explore each other's likes and dislikes. If everyone is playful and open to doing whatever pleases their partner, then you are blessed. If somebody keeps saying no and asks for intimacy or a specific act, then it's time to rethink that relationship, and you need to know that before you make any vows. Story 20. Only time I've encountered this was a 21-year-old college student. Girl I was interested in was deeply religious, and when we started to get closer, she said she was saving herself before marriage. I respected it, but then I realized the relationship wasn't that deep at that point, and I had no interest in making that commitment. She respected that, and we moved on. 26-year-old me probably would wait, though, if I genuinely felt something for them. Not necessarily commit to marriage, but to the relationship and see how compatible we are. Like any other relationship, I guess, without intimacy, of course. Story 21. This is a cultural thing. I won't marry a woman until I know she's not crazy and that we're mostly compatible in most situations. I know that for a somewhat lengthy period of time, longer than I would want to abstain. And I would also question her logic as to why intimacy should be forbidden to marriage. Does she consider herself a priceless present? She gives herself to me as a gift on the wedding night, like she's a magic unicorn. I want her to be her own person. I don't want her to consider herself as a subordinate to the married man. Only then she will unlock herself and she'll be so thankful. Most likely, she's from one of the major religions such as Islam or one of the Christian branches, which is a no-go in itself as we would have very difficult cultures and values. Like I said, Story 22. If that's her prerogative and she has the aspects I want in life, then I'll make that sacrifice. But I'm not in my 20s. I'm 42 and I'm not going to put up with a drawn-out dating and engagement. If she wants to wait until we're married, then I'll probably tell her that this relationship is focused on determining if this leads to marriage, and if not, just break up. Acceptance in all this is that we forgo the drawn-out engagement process and elope when we know that marriage is coming. No grand plans, no big wedding, just tie the knot and move on with our lives. If I was 24, I wouldn't be like this, but I've got my kids. I've got my life. I'm not looking for a courting process that determines my family structure. I'm looking for companionship going to middle age, and all that pomp is for the younger crowd. Story 23. It really depends on the person and what your plans are. If you want to marry the person, and this is what the person truly believes, then it's fine. Go get married when the time is right. If this is what the person believes in, but you don't want to get married, then walk away. You both deserve to be with someone more compatible. If this is not what the person believes in, but still demands marriage first, walk away. Most likely this person already had intimacy with plenty of other people. It's just manipulation to get you to marry the person. This kind of manipulation is just the beginning of a lifetime of manipulation. It is also very telling how this person sees you, which is someone they can manipulate and use for their own plans. Story 24. I'm one of the people who wants to wait until marriage, so obviously I'd respect their decision. I can't say why other people want to wait, but I personally have a few reasons. There are religious aspects to it, but there are also moral aspects as well. With the way I was raised, I just don't feel like it would be right. I'd rather have intimacy with somebody who I deeply know and love and not some random person or even a girlfriend. Another reason is the regret I'd feel if the relationship doesn't work out. I had a cruel girlfriend earlier this year. It's over now, but I'm glad I didn't do anything with that monster of a person. No matter what your stance on this is, it's your opinion and you have your reasons. Live how you want to live. Story 25. There's only 3 ways to handle this without being a creep. Number 1, if you think that you can't handle a lack of intimacy in a relationship, you call things off. Number 2, if you feel that you can handle that kind of relationship, you continue with the relationship, but don't pressure the person for it. Number 3, if you realize throughout the relationship that you can't handle that after all, you call things off. Pressuring someone into intimacy is a form of SA, in my opinion. This is something that I learned in the whole Me Too movement, and it makes sense. That person will also likely resent you if they have intimacy under pressure. I can imagine that they'll feel as though you took advantage of them, too. So, even if it's not literally SA, how would you feel knowing that you didn't truly have that person's full consent to have intimacy with you? Hot take, but it's literally SA. Story 26. Assess your priorities. Do you love them? Would you be willing to wait? There's validity to the argument that compatibility is important to a healthy relationship, and you wouldn't buy a car without test driving it. There's also validity to the ideal of it being sacred and special and worth waiting for, and if you love each other, you work through potential incompatibilities. There's no right or wrong. You have your boundaries and priorities, and so do they, and both are valid. But they may not be in alignment, and that's okay. The right person is always better than just a person. Story 27. Based on the comments, it's really half and half. One is being respectful of their boundaries and being sure they are not being used, and the other is breaking up with them because it will probably mean incompatibility down the line, and not being able to have intimacy as much. I agree with both, because I can see the reasoning, but for me, personally, I'd go with the respecting boundaries part. If I really love them, then I'm most likely going to stick around for the long term. If I'm not sure about making that commitment, then I'd let them go. So it all depends on how I feel about that person and if I want to stay with them for the long term. Story 28. When I started dating my now husband, I asked him how he would feel if we never had intimacy. To my surprise, he said he was okay with that. It wasn't even that I was hell-bent against it. I was just so terrified of it. I spent the majority of my childhood being SA'd and had heard that it was painful. Mostly, I didn't know if I was physically comfortable with it. I changed my mind eventually. That being said, if I was with someone and they told me they wanted to wait for marriage, I'd be okay with that. It wouldn't be a deal breaker for me. Would you leave or would you stay? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 29. It really depends on you and how you feel about her. When I started going out with my wife, she told me the same thing. She's religious. Funny thing is, she's in the middle of a divorce and had 2 kids already. This went on for about 6 months. Then one day I asked her, "Do you think we should set a date?" She said, "A date for what?" I said, "To get married." I didn't ask her to marry me, just to set a date. We had intimacy the same week, and her son was at our wedding the following year. I asked why she said she wanted to wait, especially considering being divorced and having kids already. She said she just wanted to make sure I was committed to our relationship and that I truly loved her for her and not just for her intimacy. My wife is very hot. First time I saw her, I wanted to sleep with her, but while dating and not having intimacy, we formed an unbreakable bond. Story 30. I wouldn't mind at all and be of a similar mindset myself. I wanted to wait at the very least a year, preferably longer and maybe until marriage, because the thought of having intimacy with more than one person in my life is super unappealing to me. And I wanted to make sure it's with the right one, plus I don't want a relationship that wouldn't work without intimacy. Luckily, my husband was absolutely willing to wait as long as I wanted and never even talked about the subject before I brought it up again, 1.5 years into a relationship. He proposed shortly after, and we're happily married now, knowing that I can trust him completely. Story 31. It wouldn't work for me for a couple of reasons. Number 1, if it's for a religious reason, I would doubt that we're compatible in that sense. Number 2, I don't want to or plan on ever getting married. I'd never be mean or judgmental towards someone who said that they were waiting until marriage, but a relationship would not go far. Story 32. I'd be okay with that, as long as I see a real future with him or as long as I'm with him for a non-intimate reason. If a man told me he wanted to wait until marriage, though, I'd definitely make an effort to still talk about our interests and fantasies to make sure that we're compatible in the bedroom, and I'd probably recommend that he read some educational materials on it if he's pure too, just to make sure things go off without a hitch when we finally do make love. I'd definitely try to tempt him, though. Not because I actually want him to violate his code of ethics, but because I want to see the look in his eye. Story 33. I think it's fine as a personal preference and something you say on the first date. I think it becomes more and more disrespectful the longer you build a relationship without saying it. Intimacy is so important to our relationship. I know that sounds redundant, but it's worth getting down and text for the people in the back. I'm not dating for a friendship. I have those already. I'm not wild about the concept of important pieces of the relationship being decided unilaterally. Best, it's a person who isn't emotionally prepared for a relationship, which should always be based in compromise. At worst, it's manipulative. Try to replace intimacy with another important part of the relationship. If I said to you, "Yes, we can date, but I won't be exclusive with you until we're married," that would technically be my right, but it would make me an incompatible partner to the vast majority of people. Try any other aspect of a healthy relationship. Vulnerability, communication, compromise, meeting friends and family, emotional intimacy. So yeah, some people have really absurd preferences. Don't shock me that this one overlaps heavily with people who believe in the invisible sky man. And that's fine, but the first time it comes up is going to be the last date 100% of the time. Story 34. I was raised one of Jehovah's Witnesses who believe in no intimacy before marriage. The first wife and I abstained. Never again. In that department, we were completely incompatible. It was bad. We both tried, but in 3 years, it did not improve. Now I tell my kids not to even consider marriage until you've lived with that person for a year. Intimacy is implied. Marriage is too big of a commitment to simply roll the dice, which is exactly what you're doing if you don't have intimacy beforehand. Story 35. I'm not going to give some BS answer, lol. And just for the record, I don't give a crap about religion. Intimacy is one of the most important things in a relationship. Think of it like committing to a car or a house. Would you buy a car without test driving it? Would you buy a house without even going in it? If you are someone that wants to wait until marriage or is in a relationship with someone that wants to wait until marriage, more power to you. Do you. Be happy. Question is asking what I would do. Story 36. Waiting until you're in a lifelong legally binding commitment to each other before engaging in something that makes you incredibly vulnerable and makes your brain chemicals go burr just sounds like a really bad idea. If you two don't click at that point, it can really break things, and then that leads to maintaining an increasingly tense or toxic relationship or having to deal with the hardship and cost of getting a divorce. You do you. We'll respect your boundaries, but it's just not for me for a risk assessment viewpoint. Story 37. That's a deal breaker for me. It's not really because I wouldn't be able to wait, but more because I want my future wife to be absolutely sure she knows what I'm like in bed before we get married. Intimacy is important, and I don't want her second-guessing things after we make what is supposed to be a life-changing decision. The way I see it, marriage shouldn't change anything about the relationship, and we should know everything about each other before it happens. That includes living together and knowing what we're like in bed. Story 38. In all seriousness, this is a compatibility deal. I wouldn't be keen on waiting for marriage being a condition for intimacy. To me, sanctity is an imaginary stipulation and a leftover ritual from a time when women were property. I acknowledge I ended up marrying a Christian, but there's pretty much no religiosity I have to adhere to. I married her so she and her kids could benefit from my insurance. Romantic, I know. Incompatibility can be a serious issue in a relationship. Being forced to wait until breaking that contract requires a lot of money, time, and headaches, just forces people to remain in unhappy situations. I would just say it's a good enough reason to just not pursue a relationship further. Story 39. That's my ideal partner. Don't have to worry about pregnancy. Most important thing, or feel guilty with myself for not waiting. Don't have to worry about hiding it from other people, unless living together, of course. And once you're married, it's just so raw, emotional, not a single care in the world and no one to judge you whatsoever. Plus, you can do it whenever and wherever you like. Worked perfectly with my wife and I, and she agrees. Story 40. I'd probably reassess the relationship a bit. Not because I can't wait, but because this is probably indicative of some differences in values. Most people I've met who care about this sort of thing are quite religious, and I am not. Also, I'm in my 30s and would expect to be dating someone kinda in that age range, which tends to underscore the idea that they're probably religious. There's a difference between saving it and marrying at 22 and saving until 32. Story 41. For a while, I always thought I wouldn't mind and would respect my partner's wishes, but after going through a few relationships, my opinion has changed. Intimate compatibility is a huge part of a relationship to me. The idea of risking not being compatible through marriage seems like it could be avoided pretty easily. I definitely understand waiting until you're sure that your partner is with you for more than your body, but to me, it would be unreasonable to wait until after marriage to find out if we're compatible. It would be like buying a car without even test driving it. Sure, you can judge how you think it would drive just by getting to know the car super well, fantasize about what it would be like to drive, but till you take it out for a spin, you really have no idea. Story 42. Nope, I'd get the heck out of there. I'm not going to get married to someone only to find out that we're completely incompatible. Like having 2 rounds max? There's no need for that. By that time, we spent so much time and money just to find out that the person I'm with cannot satisfy me or that I cannot satisfy them. Not to say that you can talk about intimacy beforehand and usually find these things out, but that only goes so far and is only so reliable. Plenty of things look great on paper, but when you actually start doing them, it's awful. People need to experience every part of each other before they commit to something like marriage. I'm not going to enter a monogamous relationship with someone before knowing them as a person, and I'm not going to marry someone without knowing them in bed. Story 43. Even besides compatibility, it also just falls under intimacy in general. You don't have to make love to be intimate, sure, but in a lot of situations, making love kind of ends as the conclusion to an intimate event. If you can't be comfortable or compatible, how do you even share intimacy? The ability to talk freely, run your fingers through her hair, enjoy a moment together, and, your thoughts are starting to run wild and so are hers. Hopefully, depending on your establishment, they're not completely interlocked, but they definitely hold the same keys to many of the locks in my honest opinion. Healthy intimacy continues a healthy relationship. If you can't even give a forward reason about why you can't have intimacy, how do you continue to also be intimate or comfortable in those moments? It's a vulnerability on both sides. Story 44. I would go on a few more dates with him, assuming things were already going well, and see about how our chemistry was and where we stood on other important issues. It's also important to know, would he shame me because I don't agree with him? If not, and everything else was as perfect as it could be, and I thought it was worth it, I would wait. That doesn't mean I'm willing to date 10 years, though, or even for the sake of this. Having a super short period of time from dating to marriage. I would never get married when I wasn't ready, even if it was to have intimacy or live together. That would almost guarantee a divorce down the line. Story 45. If the reasoning behind it is religiousness or conservatism, I wouldn't continue the relationship because those are the two things I wouldn't want to have any say in my relationships. If the reasoning is that they don't trust or like me enough, then I'd want to know why they're even in a relationship with me. If it's at the beginning of the relationship, I'd ask if they want some time to get to know me better. If, in their eyes, the only thing that'll allow us to have intimacy is a piece of paper given by the authorities, then I wouldn't want to marry someone like that. The relationship would probably end there. Story 46. My husband and I were a lot more fundamental and conservative when we met, so we didn't have intimacy until we were married. Also, we both were pure. That's not to say we didn't do everything else, but we saved the actual making love for our wedding night. It was actually not awkward at all, which I thought it would be. However, we've both completely rejected the ideas we had back then and totally advocate for any intimate relationship in or out of marriage as long as you don't hurt yourself or anyone. Story 47. There's no right or wrong here. This is just personal preference, and where these personal preferences differ, you find that there either is or isn't compatibility. It is, in my opinion, that intimacy is too big a part of a successful relationship to roll the dice on compatibility. Furthermore, the insistence on being married before intimacy is almost certainly rooted in some religious convictions that I don't share and I'm basically intolerant of. So, multiple incompatibilities, sounds like it's time to move on. Story 48. Honestly, that'd be a deal breaker for me. It has been a deal breaker for me. There's nothing wrong with wanting to wait. If that's your jam, I would genuinely commend your self-control and commitment to that goal. The person I dated that I broke up with for having that opinion is a really good guy, and I'm sure he and his wife were super happy. But I wouldn't marry someone I hadn't had intimacy with first. I need to know that we're compatible, view intimacy similarly on a fundamental level, and that it's something we can both enjoy. Forever is a long time to have intimacy that isn't satisfying. And for some people, that's not a big deal, and intimacy isn't a big part of their relationships. Those people deserve to be together and not with partners whose views on intimacy don't align, so one or both of them is miserable in the long run. Story 49. So I was seeing a girl who, mind you, the first time we FaceTimed off Tinder, asked me to watch her do intimate stuff, and I said no. She was surprised. 2 days later, we met up in person, had an early dinner, went back to my place, and she told me she wanted to wait to have intimacy because she wanted to make sure I was deserving of her. Confused as heck, I said, okay. Later that night, she started making out with me, took me to bed, teased me like crazy, and when we got close to doing it, she said no, I don't want to go further. So for like 2 weeks, this continued. We had a conversation and she told me about her ex, a couple of guys she had fun with, etc. I was like, I get it. I'm the nice guy who wasn't being a schmuck to her. I mean, there were certain things she liked that were out of the ordinary for me. I told her, I'll be real with you, but I have no desire to be your let's try this nice guy out and then leave him high and dry person. I'm just not into that. She just got mad, flipped out on me and said I was like the rest of them. I was like, I can't be because I didn't sleep with you in any shape or form. She left and didn't talk to me for about 2 months, and then out of nowhere, she called me. I picked up the phone and she asked me if I wanted to take her out for dinner. She said she was ready, and I was like, I'm happy for her, but she called the wrong person. And I hung up the phone. I got all types of insulting text messages and calls. Story 50. Great. I wouldn't mind either. In fact, I'd be totally happy about that. As a male, it comes across weird to women that I had that view. Mine came from a few places, religious beliefs, and also because of science. Building bonds and connections with people that aren't staying around really messes with you. I'm a follower of Christ, and as a Christian, I believe that intimacy is a fantastic, fun, and fabulous act, but it has boundaries for writing a marital relationship. Scientifically, it's something that brings two people together and closer through oxytocin. That stuff literally cements that person in your brain. I don't want to go around life having all these bonds building and breaking, so I'd be on board and appreciate that partner of mine even more. Thanks for taking the pressure off. Story 51. My husband and I were both pure until we were married. This was for religious reasons as well, as we knew it was what we wanted for ourselves. We have a wonderful marriage with a healthy, intimate life. We took some twists and turns in our intimate life to figure out what worked well, what didn't, and we got to grow together in that. It has been both really fun and beautiful. And there's something to be said for being with only one person your entire life. It certainly hasn't been boring. Story 52. I could, but why would I want that when intimacy is so great? If she were pure with some good argument, why wait? I'd be fine with it. If she had a bunch of partners already, I'd ask for reasons why wait now with me. Personally, I think waiting before marriage is silly, especially if both partners have already had intimacy before, as I like to do it as often as possible, but given enough motivation, maybe. Maybe after a good start to the relationship, knowing we loved each other and then asking to wait for marriage, I might be down to do that, though I don't know how long I'd last. Lol. Story 53. Oof, reading these comments. Relationship is more than intimacy. If you have a really good connection, it won't matter. Yes, a relationship is more than intimacy, but being stuck with someone who is lousy in bed, being lousy in bed is 95% being selfish in bed. Not paying attention to what your partner needs or likes for the rest of your life is a fate I wouldn't wish on anyone. And being bad in bed goes for everyone, not just men. I've heard as many stories from bi or straight men about women who think they all have to do is be there as I have from bi or straight women about men who think that just doing it for 30 seconds or 3 hours is amazing. As for the good connection one, well, that's a nice thought, but in real life, intimacy is important. Also, see point 1 about being stuck forever with someone who doesn't meet your needs in bed. Story 54. I have to have an emotional connection before I give myself to anyone. Look, I don't know. I understand I'm not like 99% of the apparent population. I just don't get it. It's not like I'm hyper-religious, spiritual, but I hate organized religion. I'm not a man-hating feminist. I just don't get why it's so damn important to have intimacy with someone after knowing them for only a few hours or weeks. I've tried to be like everyone else. Sure, I had summer flings or whatever, but beyond that, no interest. It's frustrating trying to date when people only want one thing, especially when people agree to get to know you first, then make moves after a day or two. The only thing I can say is be patient with them. It's a matter of respect and consent, plain and simple. If intimacy immediately is that important, there's plenty available. Believe me. Move on for yourself and that other person, if that's your priority. If your priority is that person, stick with it. It's worth it. If you have ever made love as opposed to just having intimacy, you know what I'm talking about. It's different. Even your average one-night stand type can tell you that. Story 55. Well, not someone. It was me in the relationship. Being a boy, yes, it was weird for the girl, and yeah, she was excited for a physical relationship, but I wasn't. This was a very petty reason, I think, for things to fall apart. I tried to be respectful, to stay within my own boundaries and not hurt her feelings, but it just wouldn't work out. I don't know why, but when this thing about not getting physical leans towards boys, people tend to disregard them, saying things like, being a boy, how can you say no? You must be sick. These comments are often passed. Intimacy is not everything. People need time. Please don't give up because of time. If you're with them, they'll have an eternity. Story 56. That could be tough. I have no problem with folks that wait for marriage for whatever reason. Their call. But personally, especially if I could see myself marrying the girl at some point, I mean, look, to me chemistry is important. It's not the biggest thing, but it is definitely a thing. Intimacy is too good to have bad intimacy for the rest of your life. Is it something that can be worked on? Sure. There's a learning curve and takes time, but it can get better. But finding someone you have that comfortable chemistry with, it's amazing. It's not strictly looks either, obviously. When you've got that amazing chemistry, it's not just your personal enjoyment. It's the fact you both enjoy it. You both benefit, you know you're a good match for each other. It brings you closer, more comfortable, and not just her physically, but it makes being with her in a relationship more attractive. Yeah, no diss to her, I'd still care for her. Wouldn't be a bad split, but would have to have a talk with her. Express while it's totally okay she knows what she needs. I do too, and if we're physically incompatible before the marriage, we should move on and find a partner that'll satisfy our needs and make us happy. Story 57. Nope. Here's my theory on why I'd never marry someone who hasn't explored themselves with other people. Because that is simply human nature to be intimately curious. And that mind will always wonder what it's like to be with other people and suppress it with religion, kids, endless excuses to make them feel like they're some kind of better person for waiting for marriage. Look at the boomers, for example. Lol. Can we all obviously say that it's very clear marrying the first person you date without exploring other people doesn't work, no matter what background you come from? Because it's just human behavior. The person, or their partner, in my opinion, will absolutely one day cheat or sneak around somehow intimately, if they even stay married out of pure curiosity. Story 58. Honestly, I made the decision to be abstinent until marriage when I was 12 for religious reasons. I'm 28 now. While my reasons for being abstinent have changed, I don't regret not having intimacy. When I make that decision, it's going to be with someone I trust. That being said, I might end up with someone I trust and connect with and change my mind, but it'll be my choice. Compatibility is important, but I don't want it to be the focus, especially not at the beginning with friendship, trust, and companionship are being built. I've dated men who felt differently and parted ways with many of them in respectful and friendly manners. I appreciated them and their understanding. I've also been on the receiving end of a lot of pressure and judgment. How someone responds is a good indicator of someone's character. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.